On a quiet morning by the river, Joe jolted upright when a large crocodile suddenly swam toward his boat, its eyes locked straight onto his. This wasn't your average river sighting. The crocodile didn't look aggressive. It looked off. Oddly tense. Joe felt a mix of curiosity and discomfort tighten in his chest. He stood frozen for a few seconds before deciding to lean in and figure out what was going on. What he saw left his face drained of color. At first, Joe thought about calling a wildlife expert, but something in the crocodile's behavior made him stop. It wasn't thrashing or showing its teeth. It seemed calm, almost like it needed help. Joe couldn't shake the strange feeling growing in his gut. "What's going on with you?" he muttered under his breath, still watching carefully. The reptile didn't move much. It didn't even blink. It just waited there, like it wanted Joe to follow. The crocodile stayed still, floating with an eerie kind of patience. Not threatening, more like expectant. Joe's thoughts spun. Should he get help, or just follow it and see? Curiosity eventually won. This was too strange to ignore. There was something behind those eyes, something that didn't feel like a normal animal encounter. It wasn't the cold, wild stare of a predator. It felt urgent, like the crocodile needed him to understand. Joe made up his mind. He had to follow it. Joe fired up the motor of his boat slowly, his eyes never leaving the creature. "Okay, let's see where you're taking me," he said quietly, more to himself than anything. Right away, the crocodile turned and began swimming upstream, gliding smoothly through the water. It was obvious now. It wanted him to follow. Joe gripped the boat's edge a little tighter as they moved. The crocodile swam ahead, but every so often it would pause and look back, checking if Joe was still behind. It would turn its head, stare for a moment, then continue on. "All right, I'm coming." "Just keep going," Joe muttered, his voice low. There was a strange weight building in his chest, like he knew, deep down, that whatever waited ahead wasn't going to be ordinary. They traveled through twisting paths of the river Joe didn't usually take. The area grew thicker, full of unfamiliar trees and vines. Joe's sense of urgency picked up with every turn. His boat brushed against low branches, each scrape making him flinch. "What are you trying to show me out here?" he said out loud, eyes scanning the brush. His mind raced with stories of danger, but he kept going. Something about the crocodile's strange calm pushed him forward. Eventually, the crocodile led Joe to a quiet, hidden spot along the riverbank. The area looked freshly disturbed. Joe stood up straighter, eyeing the bent grass and snapped twigs. Something had definitely been here, recently. The crocodile drifted to the shore and stopped, as if waiting for him to do the rest. Joe's pulse quickened. "What happened here?" he whispered. The air felt heavier somehow, like it was holding a secret. Someone or something had been here not long ago. Joe stepped out of the boat and walked carefully onto the shore. That's when he noticed the scattered signs, footprints, bits of camping gear left behind. The ground was soft, full of tracks heading deeper into the brush. There were torn cans, a bent tent pole, and a couple of old sneakers lying in the dirt. Joe bent down, eyes scanning the scene. "Who left this here?" he murmured. Joe murmured to himself, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The crocodile stayed nearby, eyes sharp, almost like it was waiting for him to dig deeper into whatever was going on. A quiet sense of danger crept in as Joe carefully moved around the area. He kept his steps slow and light, scanning the ground and thick bushes. Better not make noise, he thought. No need to draw attention to himself. There were signs all over the place that someone had been here not long ago. Joe's breathing sped up as he spotted patches of ground that looked oddly discolored. Something about this place made the hair on his neck stand up. It didn't just feel strange, it felt threatening. He spotted torn clothes and random belongings scattered across the clearing. A jacket sleeve stuck out from under a bush. Some papers were lying in the dirt, half covered. Then he picked up a torn photograph. The image was faded and ripped, hard to make out. There had clearly been panic here. Something had gone very wrong. "Who was out here?" Joe muttered, glancing toward the crocodile. The animal seemed even more restless now, its tail flicking, eyes constantly moving. There was a kind of silent tension in the air, like time was running out. Suddenly, Joe heard rustling from the nearby bushes. He instinctively grabbed his fishing net, the closest thing he had to a weapon. His grip tightened. His eyes darted toward the sound, trying to catch any movement. The noise shattered the stillness of the riverbank, sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. He took a deep breath and slowly stepped toward the source, every movement slow and careful. The closer he got, the more intense the silence felt, like the forest was holding its breath. The crocodile grew more agitated, tail swishing and eyes darting in all directions. Its body language only made Joe's nerves spike higher. He watched the animal closely and whispered, "All right, I get it. Something's definitely off." The crocodile wasn't panicking, but it was clearly on edge, like whatever had happened here hadn't fully passed. The danger still lingered. Joe spotted a narrow trail leading away from the riverbank. The grass was crushed, branches bent out of place. Someone had come through here fast. He inhaled deeply and stepped forward, keeping his ears tuned to every crunch, snap, or rustle around him. The crocodile followed right beside him, staying close like a guide. Joe hoped the trail would give him answers. Something, anything to explain what was going on. Each step deeper into the woods made Joe more cautious. The forest was thick, and the path ahead looked untouched in years, except for the signs of a recent struggle. Broken branches, torn leaves, drops of blood here and there. Joe felt his stomach twist. "What in the world happened out here?" he said under his breath. The pieces were starting to paint a grim picture. Someone had been running for their life, and whatever they were running from might still be out here. The crocodile stayed near, gently nudging Joe now and then, as if to say, "Keep going." That small push gave Joe just enough reason to move forward. Everything about this felt wrong, but stopping didn't feel like an option either. Joe pulled out his phone, hoping to get help. No signal, not even a single bar. He stared at the screen, frustrated. "Of course," he muttered. "Just great." Alone in the woods, no way to call for backup. He slipped the phone back in his pocket, trying to steady himself. It was just him and this strange, persistent crocodile. But oddly, the animal's presence gave him a sense of direction. Its nudges felt deliberate, like it had chosen him for a reason. Joe shook his head slightly, amazed at how natural it now felt to trust the creature. As strange as it all was, he couldn't shake the feeling that the crocodile was leading him towards something he needed to see. Then he moved with purpose, brushing off the fear that tried to slow him down. Something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just following anymore. He was determined. Together, he and the crocodile made their way through the thick forest, step by careful step. Eventually, Joe spotted a small campsite tucked among the trees. It looked abandoned, like someone had left in a hurry. The tents had collapsed, and gear was scattered around, like it had been dropped mid-run. A broken branch held a damaged lantern, still hanging on by a wire. "Looks like someone left in a panic," Joe said quietly, stepping around the mess with care. The crocodile stayed right at his side, its eyes sharp, scanning the area as if it expected something. Joe's mind worked in overdrive, trying to make sense of what could have caused someone to flee so fast. Among the gear, Joe noticed a worn-out map and a backpack half buried in the dirt. He knelt and opened it, finding food supplies and a notebook. The map caught his attention. It was detailed, with routes and markings through the area. This wasn't a casual hiker's map. "What's in here?" he muttered, flipping open the journal. The handwriting was neat and precise. Page after page of field notes, all focused on the crocodiles in the region. Whoever wrote this had been studying them closely. Joe's curiosity grew. The person behind this journal had clearly been dedicated to their research. "So someone's been living out here, watching them?" he said under his breath, flipping through more pages. Each entry added more context, more puzzle pieces to the scattered camp and strange events. Then he hit the last entry. It was different. The writing, once steady and clean, now looked rushed. Fear came through in the way the words were written. The tone had shifted completely. Joe's eyebrows drew together as he read. Whatever the researcher had found, it had terrified them. "What did you see?" Joe whispered, trying to picture what kind of discovery could have made someone run like that. The journal didn't say exactly, but the panic in that final note said enough. Joe sat with that last page for a moment. It felt heavy, like something was still out there. He looked around the camp again, piecing together the journal's abrupt end with the chaos surrounding him. Someone had fled in a panic, and whoever it was might still be out there, alone, or worse. Joe's jaw tightened. He couldn't just walk away now, not if there was even a chance someone needed help. He looked at the crocodile, surprised to find it still and calm for the first time in a while. Then a thought hit him hard. The journal had mentioned a researcher studying crocodiles in this exact area. Could this one be connected to her? Had it been trying to lead him to her all along? The idea sent a chill down his spine. "You're trying to show me something, aren't you?" he said softly, realizing the animal's urgency matched his own. Even though fear tugged at him, Joe knew what he had to do. He picked up his makeshift weapon and squared his shoulders. "Let's do this," he said firmly. The crocodile turned and began moving again, and Joe followed without hesitation. Every step felt heavier than the last, but he kept going. He didn't know what he'd find, but he knew turning back wasn't an option. As they pushed through the tougher terrain, doubt crept in. "Should have brought backup," he muttered, brushing sweat from his brow. The forest closed in tighter, the shadows getting darker. But then he remembered the journal, the way the words had changed at the end, and he forced himself to keep moving. "I'm not turning back now," he whispered with grit. He had to see this through. Whatever the truth was, he was getting closer. Joe's heart skipped as he spotted a makeshift. Up ahead, Joe spotted a shelter, roughly built and barely noticeable among the trees. It was so well camouflaged, it blended right into the surroundings. He crept toward it slowly, every sense on edge. "This must be it," he murmured, tightening his grip on the fishing net. The crocodile stopped a few feet back, eyes fixed on the shelter like it was waiting. Joe's heart pounded as he approached, the urgency inside him reaching a boiling point. Whatever was in there, it was important. The air felt heavy with tension as Joe stepped closer. Then he heard something. Faint, muffled sounds from inside. He froze, trying to listen. The noises were soft, weak. Someone was in there. "Someone's in there," he whispered, clutching the net tighter. Moving slowly, he crept up to the doorway, careful not to make any noise. The crocodile didn't follow him this time. It stayed back, like it was keeping watch. Joe's breath caught as he leaned in and peeked inside. His eyes widened. Lying on the rough floor of the shelter was a woman, unconscious, tied up, and clearly in bad shape. Each second dragged as Joe processed what he was seeing. "Oh my God," he whispered. He recognized her immediately from the journal. It was Dr. Emily Harris, the researcher. Without wasting another second, Joe rushed to her side, hands shaking as he began untying the ropes. Reality hit him hard. This was serious. Her wrists were raw, clearly from struggling. "Hang on, I've got you," he said softly, glancing around to make sure they were still alone. His heart pounded as he worked the knots free. Once she was untied, he quickly checked her for injuries, the memory of her notes adding to his urgency. "We need to get you out of here," he said, trying to stay calm as anxiety pressed in. As Joe gently looked over her arms, he noticed strange marks, definitely not regular bruises. They looked more like punctures, odd and unsettling. "What happened to you?" he murmured, nudging her awake as gently as he could. Every second counted now. Those marks only pushed his urgency further. She stirred a little, her eyelids twitching. Joe felt a wave of relief, but he knew they weren't safe yet. Dr. Harris slowly regained consciousness, blinking up at him in confusion. She looked disoriented at first, then locked eyes with Joe. "Who are you?" she asked weakly. Joe gave a small, reassuring smile. "I'm Joe. I found your journal and followed your crocodile." Her eyes widened slightly as recognition clicked. "Thank you," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I'm Dr. Emily Harris. They captured me." Joe nodded, keeping his voice low. "We need to move." "It's not safe here," in a weak voice, Doctor. Harris began to explain. "I was investigating illegal poaching in the area. They caught me off guard and took me." Joe listened, his jaw tightening. "Poachers? Out here?" he asked, stunned. She nodded slowly, exhaustion clear on her face. "Yes, they've been smuggling using the crocodiles. I got too close, so they grabbed me." Joe felt his resolve harden. No wonder the crocodile had acted so strangely. It had been trying to help her. He quickly reached into her backpack and pulled out a water bottle and a half-crushed energy bar. "Here, drink this," he said, handing her the bottle. She took slow, small sips, gaining a little strength. "Thanks," she murmured. Joe opened the energy bar and passed it to her. "Eat a little?" "It'll help." She nodded and nibbled slowly, clearly drained. Joe kept his eyes on the surrounding forest. The silence felt too fragile. Any minute now, someone could come back. Then a sharp noise rang out, branches breaking nearby. Joe froze, his whole body tensed. "We need to hide," he said urgently. Without wasting a second, he helped Dr. Harris to her feet, guiding her behind a thick patch of bushes. "Stay low. Don't make a sound," he instructed. She nodded, breath shaky but controlled. Every crunch or rustle around them felt deafening. Joe crouched near the edge of the bushes, just enough to keep watch without revealing himself. He tightened his grip on the fishing net, ready to defend them if needed. The crocodile stayed close, its body low and eyes locked ahead, almost like it was guarding them both. "Stay calm," Joe whispered to himself, hoping it would be enough. He whispered to Dr. Harris, who gave a small nod, barely moving. The tension in the air was thick, every second dragging out longer than the last. Joe stayed alert, ready for whatever might come next. Then 2 large men pushed through the dense brush, their eyes scanning the area. "Where'd she go?" one of them snapped. They were clearly looking for Dr. Harris. Joe held his breath and stayed perfectly still, watching their every move. The men looked like they knew what they were doing, sharp, alert, and dangerous. Joe could see it in how they moved, how they spoke. He knew he had to keep Dr. Harris hidden no matter what. Just ahead, the crocodile shifted quietly, tracking the poachers with careful eyes. Joe crouched behind a thick tree, holding a heavy branch he had picked up earlier. His heart pounded in his chest as he listened closely. "We can't let her expose us," one of the men hissed, voice low but urgent. Joe's stomach turned. These guys weren't just criminals. They were willing to do anything to keep their secret. He gripped the branch tighter, the reality of the danger settling in. The poachers crept closer. Joe focused on keeping calm, ready to act if it came down to it. The 2 men began arguing about what to do next. "We can't lose her now. We've got to secure the goods," one said. The other shook his head. "No, we find her first. Then deal with the shipment." Joe listened, eyes narrowed. The pieces started coming together. They weren't just hiding something. They'd been using the crocodiles to move stolen goods. It all made horrible sense now. Joe stayed low, trying to take in every word. The men were part of something far bigger and far more dangerous than he'd realized. They were organized and ruthless, and Dr. Harris had gotten too close. He knew now, more than ever, they had to get out fast. Her life depended on it. When the poachers finally started walking away, Joe didn't waste a second. He slipped back to Dr. Harris's side. "We need to move." "Now," he whispered, helping her up. She leaned on him, trusting his urgency. The crocodile stood nearby, as if waiting for them to catch up, still acting like a quiet protector. Joe moved with intention, wanting to put as much distance between them and the poachers as possible. Every step mattered. They moved quickly but kept quiet, careful not to draw attention. Joe's mind worked fast, figuring out the best route. "We need to get back to the river," he said in a low voice. "It's our best chance." Dr. Harris nodded, still leaning on him for support. "If we have to," Joe added, "we can use the crocodile as a distraction." That thought gave him just a little more confidence. With a clear plan forming, they began their way back. Every step was quiet but deliberate. They knew what they had to do: reach safety and get help. As they neared the river, Joe spotted a narrow, hidden trail cutting through thick trees. "This way," he said, helping Dr. Harris through the brush. The crocodile stayed close, alert and focused, its presence oddly comforting. Each step brought them closer to the water and, hopefully, to safety. Joe moved with care, listening for any signs the poachers were following. The trail, though narrow and overgrown, felt like a lifeline. As they walked, Dr. Harris spoke in a hushed tone, filling Joe in on what she'd learned. "These poachers are highly organized," she said quietly. "They've been moving rare species and illegal goods through secret routes." Joe listened carefully, each word adding to the weight of what they were facing. "They'll do anything to keep it going," she added, her voice low and strained. Joe nodded, the full danger of the situation sinking in. They had to reach. They needed to reach the authorities, fast. Dr. Harris explained just how brutal the poachers' methods were. "They trap animals using hidden snares and smuggle them in custom-made crates," she said quietly. "Their operation's huge. They're after rare species that sell for a lot on the black market." Joe clenched his jaw, anger rising in his chest. "We have to stop them," he said firmly. The scale of it all was overwhelming, but they couldn't back down now. With a shared sense of purpose, they pushed forward. Joe knew they had to get word out, but they still had a long way to go. "We need to make it to the river and figure out how to signal for help," he said, steadying Dr. Harris as she stepped over a fallen log. She nodded, clearly exhausted, but still determined. "There might be an outpost nearby," she suggested, her voice hopeful. Joe's thoughts raced. They needed options, and fast. Every step had to count now. There was no room for error. The crocodile stayed close, still leading them through the dense forest. It almost felt like it was guarding them. Every now and then it looked back, making sure they were still following. "Why is it helping us?" Dr. Harris asked quietly. Joe shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm glad it is." The animal's presence gave them just enough of an edge to keep moving, and Joe leaned into that feeling of trust, even if he didn't fully understand it. Wanting to make things easier, Joe picked up a sturdy branch and shaped it into a walking stick. "Here, lean on this," he said, handing it to her. Dr. Harris took it gratefully, testing it with her weight. "Thanks, Joe," she said softly. The branch helped her move more steadily, giving her just enough support to keep pace. Joe stayed alert, eyes scanning every shadow. They were getting closer. He could feel it. and time was running out. They pressed on together, each step a quiet push toward freedom. The forest stretched on, winding and confusing, but Joe kept guiding her forward with calm focus. "We're almost there," he kept saying, even if he wasn't sure himself. The crocodile moved ahead, steady and sure. Its presence was a strange comfort, a silent guardian walking them through danger. One goal kept them moving: reach safety and tell someone what was happening out here. Finally, through the trees, they saw it, a small outpost near the river. The sight sparked a flicker of hope in both of them. "We might be able to get help here," Joe said, feeling his energy lift. The building looked old but solid. "Let's see if there's any communication equipment, Doctor," Harris said, her voice picking up. They approached carefully, alert to the possibility that it might not be safe. The crocodile stayed close, still scanning the area, calm but alert. Inside the outpost, they found a dusty old radio sitting on a cluttered table. Joe rushed over, wiping off the grime. "This could work," he said, checking the knobs and wires. Dr. Harris nodded, hope lighting up her tired face. "Let's try sending a signal," she said urgently. Joe began adjusting the settings, hands steady despite the pressure. This was their shot, maybe their only one. He sent out a distress call, clearly and calmly. "We need help, now. Illegal poaching operation. We're in danger," he repeated into the mic. Dr. Harris stood beside him, tense, listening through the crackling static. The air around them felt heavy with anticipation. Every second dragged as they waited. Then, finally, a faint voice broke through the static. "Help is on the way." Relief hit like a wave. Joe and Dr. Harris exchanged a glance, but they knew they weren't out of danger yet. They needed to stay hidden until help arrived. Ears still tuned to the radio, they suddenly caught the distant sound of helicopters. "Sounds like help is on the way," Joe said again, this time with a small smile. Just a little longer, and they'd be safe. Dr. Harris nodded, a small spark of hope in her eyes, but the sound of helicopters brought a sharp reminder. They still weren't safe. The poachers would hear them too. "We need to stay hidden until they land," Joe said calmly, though his eyes scanned the tree line. Even with help on the way, the danger hadn't passed. "Keep low," he whispered, guiding Dr. Harris to a better hiding spot. The crocodile moved in closer, its eyes sweeping the surroundings like a watchful guard. Every noise seemed louder, every leaf that moved made Joe tense. His mind worked fast, thinking of ways to keep them hidden just a little longer. The air was thick with urgency, almost hard to breathe. Joe prepared himself for a final standoff, using the terrain around them as cover. He scoped out nearby trees and natural barriers they could use if needed. "Stay here and stay quiet," he told Dr. Harris. She nodded, her eyes full of worry, but trusting him completely. Joe picked up a solid branch and crouched behind a tree, alert and ready. The crocodile remained nearby, oddly calm but focused. Its presence gave Joe a strange sense of reassurance. They couldn't run now. They had to hold their ground. Then the helicopters thundered overhead, the sound shaking the treetops. Within moments, law enforcement teams dropped in, moving quickly and with purpose. Joe stayed hidden for a second longer, then stood. "Over here!" he shouted, waving his arms to get their attention. Dr. Harris stayed in cover, watching him carefully. Seeing officers spread through the area brought a kind of relief Joe hadn't felt in hours. The chaos pushed the poachers to run, realizing they were outmatched. Joe watched as the men tried to disappear into the trees. "Let's hope they don't get far," he muttered, his eyes tracking their retreat. Moments later, officers were on them, fast. The poachers didn't put up much of a fight. One by one, they were caught and cuffed. Joe finally felt his heartbeat begin to slow. It was almost over. Dr. Harris stepped out, her legs unsteady, but her voice clear. "Here are my notes, and the journal," she said, handing over the documents. The officers took them seriously, flipping through the pages as she explained. "This is gold," one of them said, clearly impressed. "We can use this to break the whole thing open." Joe watched, pride building quietly inside him. Dr. Harris's bravery had made all the difference. Officers turned to Joe next, nodding in respect. "You did good out there," one said, clapping him on the shoulder. Joe gave a small nod and the faintest smile. But deep down, something still felt off, like this wasn't the end of the story. Dr. Harris noticed the look on his face. "We'll get to the bottom of it," she said gently. Joe didn't answer right away. That same feeling in his gut remained. He scanned the trees again. "Something's still out there," he muttered. Dr. Harris stood beside him, her face serious. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice steady. Whatever came next, they were in it together now. What they'd been through only made them more determined to see it through. As the dust settled and the noise faded, Joe turned to the river. The crocodile was swimming away, calm, unhurried. "Looks like it's finally at peace, Doctor," Harris said quietly. The animal paused just for a second, as if acknowledging them, then slipped beneath the water and disappeared. Joe watched it go, feeling a quiet sense of closure. Still, something about the connection between Dr. Harris and the crocodile stayed with him. "There's more to this, isn't there?" he asked softly. She didn't say anything, just gave a slow nod. Later, Joe received a letter from Dr. Harris thanking him for what he'd done. "You saved my life," she wrote. Her words were full of genuine gratitude, but the letter also held something unexpected, a secret that left Joe completely stunned. The crocodile, she explained, hadn't been acting randomly. It had been trained by her to recognize when something was wrong and to seek help from humans. Joe sat in disbelief, finally understanding why it had come to him. Reading on, he was in awe. This wasn't just some wild encounter, it was the result of years of careful research. The crocodile's behavior wasn't a fluke. It was intentional. It was proof of something bigger. Dr. Harris had broken new ground with her work, and Joe was only now seeing just how far it had gone. She described the training in detail, how she'd used food rewards, specific patterns, and countless hours of interaction to teach the crocodile how to respond in different situations. It was a slow process, built on trust and patience. Joe could hardly believe it. Everything the crocodile had done, the calm, the guidance, the silent watching, it all made sense now. It hadn't been acting on instinct. It had a purpose. Dr. Harris had spent years studying these animals, building relationships few thought possible. She had watched, listened, and interacted until they trusted her. Joe felt a wave of respect as he took it all in. The crocodile's intelligence, its awareness. People had no idea what these creatures were capable of. And now, Joe did. He sat with the letter in his hands, thinking about everything he'd just learned. The crocodile hadn't found him by accident. It had chosen him. It had done what it was trained to do. It had sought help, and it worked. Lives had been saved. Joe shook his head, amazed by the connection Dr. Harris had built with the animal. The final pieces clicked into place. It wasn't just survival. It was the result of a deep, powerful bond. Dr. Harris shared stories in the letter, moments that showed just how close she and the crocodile had become. It responded to her even in tense situations. Joe could feel the emotion behind her words. This wasn't just training, it was a relationship built on trust. Joe could see now that what he had witnessed wasn't random. It was something rare, something meaningful. As he thought back on the journey, Joe felt a shift inside. Every step, every decision now made more sense. The crocodile had led him, not as an animal reacting to fear, but as a partner with purpose. His heart was full of awe. What he'd been part of was bigger than anything he could have imagined. It had changed him deeply. He knew how close they'd come to real danger, and he couldn't stop thinking about the fact that it was a crocodile, a creature so often misunderstood, that had helped them survive. The experience left a lasting impression. It made Joe see the world differently. The line between human and animal wasn't as clear as he once believed. Grateful and inspired, Joe began sharing the story with others. He talked about the intelligence of crocodiles, the risks faced by wildlife, and the deep connection that had formed in that forest. People were amazed, struck by the strange partnership between man and creature. His story became more than just an adventure. It became a way to educate and raise awareness. Joe kept in touch with Dr. Harris. They exchanged letters and emails, filled with updates from her ongoing research. Every message was a reminder of the bond they now shared. With each new discovery she shared, Joe felt more connected to her, to the crocodile, and to the mission they'd both found themselves part of. The experience had changed Joe's life for good. The journey through the forest, the chase, the escape, it had all left its mark. But it was the crocodile that stayed with him most. That one brave creature, whose actions had saved lives, had sparked something in Joe. It wasn't just a memory, it was a turning point. Joe knew now that this was more than just a wild story to tell. It was a reason to act. He remained committed to protecting wildlife, sharing the truth, and honoring the courage of the animal that had come to him for help. If this story moved you, share it with someone who'd appreciate it. And if you want more stories that make you see the world a little differently, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.